Hello people, welcome back to the Euro Catch-Up Show. An amazing response to the first week's episode. You got it, and we're going to give you more of exactly that. A run through the other 4 big leagues, but we are open to suggestions if there are other leagues that you think that we should get involved at different times for different stories. One story that is huge is the Luis Rubiales story. I'll talk about that in just a second, but what you will get from this video is experts from the leagues themselves, Liga, Serie A, La Liga and the Bundesliga. I'm struggling to remember them all. And you will get expert opinion from the guys. Make sure you check out all the guys. Links to their content is in the description down below. Please support them because they're being kind enough to support me in making this show a reality this year. So please do get behind them. And obviously with deadline day on its way, who are the most important transfers in Europe that you might have missed? You're going to find out that in this episode. Stefan talks all things Bundesliga with Dortmund now panicking in the window, and now they need solutions really fast. He'll give you more on that and who those players exactly are. Nima gives us the lowdown on Romelu Lukaku's surprise move to Roma, and is Benjamin Pavard to Inter in danger or not? Could there be a protest involved as well? That will be revealed in this episode. Paul dives deep on Barcelona to find out why Xavi is not impressed, and is João Cancelo the answer? And could there be more transfers for Barcelona between now and deadline day? And finally, Jeremy is going to give you everything you need to know about Kolo Muani, and is he the best Ligue signing this season? Also, he tells us why PSG's transfer business since the World Cup is unbelievable, their best ever, and there's a player in the French league that is playing for a club that has 100 million to spend, quite possibly, if he makes a move to a club that is a very, very high profile club that needs a 6. Can you guess who that might be? Well, you're going to find out soon enough. I did want to quickly talk about Luis Rubiales, who of course is the Spanish president. It's such a huge story, and for Paul to sort of talk about that is maybe not the right thing to do. I think it's something that I need to do, as it's my channel. He has been suspended by FIFA. Interestingly, I had a sort of long chat with Flav on my Patreon, or our Patreon for James and Flav for Now, which is obviously our podcast. And actually, I didn't know enough about it at the time. And there were elements here where I was like, well, there's a lot that needs to be figured out. Since then, it's been incredibly clear what has occurred here and how there is no way out. I think Marca have put forward a headline saying global embarrassment. The fact that he's thought that just by saying this is sort of failed feminism, and that he will not resign, as you all saw the clip, right? It's just outrageous. Over 80 players now have signed to say that they will not be playing for Spain until this man is removed. You know, some of the footage, when you do actually dive a little bit deeper into it and what's gone on here, it leads to only one thing. Like, there has to be an understanding, and also this idea that actually the Spanish Federation is suggesting that Hermoso was lying when it came to consent. I think that's really damaging, incredibly damaging, and she has reiterated that it was not a consensual kiss. So that is, you know, you have to believe people's words here. You know, this was on the global stage. This is such a disappointing, salacious story that didn't need to be a part of a country's first ever Women's World Cup win. Incredibly disappointing. And yeah, needed to talk about it briefly. Rubiales has to go, needs to go, and the longer he stays, the more embarrassing it is to Spanish football as a whole, who have had, you know, quite a checkered last 12 months, probably even longer. But of course, I don't know enough about that. But our experts do know so much about their leagues. So as I say, please support them. Support this show as well. Share it to anyone you know. Let's get this as big as possible. And yeah, enjoy this week's Euro Catch-Up Show.
Hi everybody, this is Nima Ruzzari from the Italian Football Podcast, and I'm here to break down the 3 biggest talking points from the weekend in the Serie A. Big Rom's road leads him to Rome. Yes, Romelu Lukaku looks like he will be reunited with Jose Mourinho at Roma. It's been an absolutely crazy summer for him. Dramatic summer, all of his own making, if we're perfectly honest, because a transfer to Inter was all but done. But then, of course, he didn't answer his phone. Inter got angry, said they were no longer interested, signed Marko Arnautovic. There was also reports of him wanting, negotiating and talking to Juventus of all clubs behind Inter's back. Obviously, Juventus needed to offload Dusan Vlahovic to get Romelu Lukaku. That's not happening, as Vlahovic has started this season really, really well, scoring 2 games in a row now. So he was really left with no other option other than stay at Chelsea, a club that doesn't want him, and he doesn't want to be there. Or move to Saudi Arabia, a move he doesn't feel like he's ready for just yet. So when Roma came knocking on the door, he was forced to accept it, as there were no other viable options there. But also he knows Jose Mourinho, of course, from their time together at Manchester United, and also Roma desperately need a striker. So Big Rom will be given a big welcome in the Giallorossi part of the Italian capital. Waiting for Pavard. Just like the famous novel by Samuel Beckett, Inter are waiting for someone who is yet to arrive, and it's becoming tragicomical as well. Benjamin Pavard has made it absolutely clear that he only wants a move to Inter, and Inter absolutely want him. His contract expires in June 2024. Reports in Germany suggest, and in Italy suggest, that he's even on a strike now to force a move from Bayern Munich. Bayern know that he wants to leave, but Thomas Tuchel seems to be blocking this more than anyone, and it seems he's giving off these kind of Glenn Close bunny boiler vibes in terms of not wanting Benjamin Pavard to leave. But of course, the clock is ticking. The transfer window closes on September 1st at 8 p.m. Central European time. So tick-tock, tick-tock. New year, but the same old Serie A refereeing controversies. And of course, Roberto Mancini has now officially been unveiled as the new Saudi national team coach. But the biggest talking point was, of course, Samuel Elling Jr., who impeded Bologna's Ndoye when he was about to apply the finish to a tap-in off a Perin rebound, and neither the VAR or referee Di Bello gave a penalty. Thiago Motta, the Bologna coach, after the game refused to comment on it, just stared angrily into the camera, refusing to even say no comment until the interviewer moved on. But of course, the biggest talking point now is that Roberto Mancini, the former Italy national team coach who won the Euros with Italy, but failed to take them to the World Cup, resigned, of course, from Italy, and now has officially been unveiled as the new Saudi Arabia coach. Who knows what happens there, but this has definitely caused quite a bit of topics to discuss in Italy about Saudi Arabia and the emerging superpower that Saudi pose to not just Italian football, but it's a European football as a whole. Right, that's all we had time for this week. Join me next week and make sure to check us out on the Italian Football Podcast. Ciao, ciao.
Bonjour everyone, bonjour James. It's been a busy summer in Ligue 1, and it started from the top with PSG arguably having their best ever transfer window, at least since Qatar joined in 2012. Arnau Tenas, the young goalkeeper from Barcelona, Cher Ndour, Manuel Ugarte, Milan Skriniar, Lucas Hernandez, Kangin Lee, Marcos Asensio, Ousmane Dembele, Gonzalo Ramos. There's one finger left. Randal Kolo Muani might join for 60 million euros from Frankfurt. They could have gotten him for free when he left Nantes last year. They'll spend a bit of money, but what an addition of talent, experienced and young in the capital. PSG will be dangerous this year, and they were missing a piece in that puzzle for the past few years. They finally appointed the right coach, Luis Enrique, who is bigger than PSG for once. Not a coach who's going to use Paris as a stepping stone, but somebody who's already won the Champions League, successfully coached a national team, and will bring his discipline, his voice, his temper, his skills to the capital, all attributes they desperately needed in a real leader of the locker room. Very, very dangerous PSG this season. Of course, they have rivals in France, and one of them is Monaco in southeast of France, the Principality. We could call them Red Bull Monaco at this stage. They got rid of Paul Mitchell, former sporting director from the Red Bull Galaxy. They replaced him with Thiago Scuro, another sporting director who used to be in the Red Bull Galaxy. The new coach, Adi Hütter, used to coach RB Salzburg. The new goalkeeper, Philippe Keun, who comes from RB Salzburg. The strategy looks like Red Bull with a few young players. Zakaria comes from Juventus, Singo from Torino, Salisu from Southampton, and they have recruited Folarin Balogun in the last 48 hours, the striker from Monaco from Arsenal, joining Monaco, who did so well with Reims last season. Well, he's back in France and in the southeast when they've lost Brel Mbolo on injury. They were looking for a star. Folarin Balogun might be that guy. Last but not least, Stade Rennais in the northwest of France, of course, made the headlines this week when they sold Jeremy Doku to Manchester City. It's worth saying that they are owned by the third richest man in France, a billionaire. Well, they might sell another player in the EPL. Arthur Theat, the Belgian international, the defender, might join Fulham or Liverpool, two clubs that are apparently keeping a close eye on him and would like to sign him before the end of the transfer window. If he leaves, Rennes would have up to 100 million euros to spend in the last 3 days. That's a nice problem to have. We're talking about potentially Joel Matip from Liverpool or Victor Lindelof from Manchester United to come and replace Theat in defense, but they also are looking for a striker and a midfielder, and apparently they want to find that in the EPL. Time will tell, but for some action in the last 2 days of transfer window in Ligue 1, we need to look to Rennes, because the rest of the teams look like they've done their market already early, which promise a very exciting season. Merci James, au revoir.
Hi James, another fantastic weekend of German football. A lot of interesting things to talk about before the transfer window comes to a conclusion this week. We start with Bayern Munich, where, on the surface things seem to be going perfectly well. They picked up a very convincing 3-1 win over Augsburg. It was a very pedestrian win for Thomas Tuchel's side. Harry Kane scored his first league goal at the Allianz Arena from a penalty spot. Scored a fantastic dink to make it a brace on the day. And Bayern looked very comfortable for the most part. Then you kind of take a step back and you realise there are still some issues in this team. Pre-match and post-match, Thomas Tuchel spent much of the kind of media moments talking about his still desperate desire for the club to sign a number 6. He even went so far as to say if they don't sign one, he's going to have to start calling up players from the under-23 squad. He's talked a lot about Kimmich, Goretzka, Konrad Leimer. Intriguingly, very quiet on Ryan Gravenberg when, he talks about the options that he has in midfield. But either way, he says they're all very similar players. They're all number 8s. They're all more attack-minded players who are kind of being left to do defensive duties. And I think he'd probably be far more comfortable going forward if he had that kind of holding number 6 player. So that's what everyone's keeping their eyes on. There's also the kind of background noise of Benjamin Pavard potentially moving on. And I think on top of that, Bayern will probably look to bring in another right back, at least one, if not another central defender as well, if Pavard does leave. So, Bayern picking up the points they need to pick up, but certainly still have a lot of work to do in the transfer window. Things are a little more obvious over at Borussia Dortmund, who were held 1-1 to local rivals Bochum in a game that they could have very, very easily lost. Dortmund went into this new season looking like a very settled squad, but even after just 2 games and 2 pretty poor performances, seems pretty clear where they might have to spend their money before the summer window wraps up. This team are still heavily reliant on Julian Brandt. He's the playmaker. He's the guy who pulls the strings. And as we've seen in these first 2 games, first against Cologne and then Bochum, 2 very defensive teams. 2 teams are happy to sit with, 2 banks of 4 behind the ball. If they can cut off Brandt and the kind of service to him, then this Dortmund team looked very toothless very quickly. And it was only a matter of hours after the Bochum result that stories started coming out of Dortmund that Terzic was demanding a new number 9 before the window wraps up. He wants another player to kind of rival Sebastian Haller. But I think it's probably raised a few eyebrows amongst Dortmund fans because they obviously have Yusuf Moukoko, who Terzic has really struggled to kind of get a song out of. He uses him as an impact sub. But it doesn't feel like Terzic is really kind of bending his tactics or his system a lot to get the most out of the young player. And I think a lot of Dortmund fans would much rather see Dortmund get something out of Moukoko rather than spend a lot of money on another striker. And of course, the team that are causing real waves in German football this season are Xabi Alonso's Bayer Leverkusen side. They blew away Borussia Mönchengladbach very easily at the weekend, which was a rivalry, a local rivalry of course, and it's a game that's usually quite heated and quite well contested. But it was a game in which Leverkusen really dominated. It was very possession based, they were very high up the park, very reminiscent of Pep Guardiola's kind of Barcelona teams from yesteryear. Of course, they sold most of Diaby to Aston Villa in the summer, but some of your viewers may not know that they signed Jonas Hoffmann from Gladbach prior to that. So they certainly were anticipating that move, and in Hoffmann they've managed to pick up a really good kind of like-for-like replacement for Diaby. So Leverkusen look well placed to perhaps mount this surprising title challenge on Bayern. But what Leverkusen might be worried about is an offer for Jeremy Frimpong, Hincapié, Tapsoba, the key players who kind of make up that defensive line. There's a lot of rumours linking him to moves to the Premier League. So that'd be one thing to definitely keep an eye on as the transfer window comes to a close. And for anyone watching German football going forward, just to see how well this team can actually do under Xabi Alonso.
Hi James, 3 weekends into the new La Liga season and it started raining goals. Just take Sunday for example, 3 games played, 16 goals scored, and a team that scored a quarter of those goals were the reigning champions FC Barcelona. After the game, Coach Xavi spoke about how he's got concerns about his side's defending, and he said quite rightly that the team didn't defend well, and I think if you look back at the goals, he's got a point. They had managed to register Marcos Alonso in time to play for this game, and they're looking to bring in João Cancelo, which is only a matter of time before a deal for him is confirmed. The only thing that's holding it up is whether it's going to be an option to buy or an obligation to buy. So the next club that we want to look at this week is Sevilla. Currently enduring the worst start to a La Liga campaign in their history. They lost on the opening day at home to Valencia. They lost 4-3 away on the second game of the season to newly promoted Alaves. They've lost at home again this weekend to Girona. We know that they've had a bit of a shake-up off the field this summer with the departure of Monchi, the man who was pretty much lauded as the mastermind behind the club's success in recent years, as much as any head coach was, for his ability to bring in players and sell players at the right time and make a good profit on them. With the exception of the possible arrival of Clement Lenglet from Barcelona on loan, they've actually been linked with more players leaving than they have arriving. Striker Youssef En-Nesyri, who scored in UEFA Super Cup against Manchester City and has always sort of proven himself to be capable of scoring at the highest level, or at least scoring great goals, maybe not so much with the frequency that the team would hope for. He's been linked with a move to West Ham United, and there's a couple of other players that could be out the door as well. We've seen with the fullback Acuna. So it's a difficult moment for Sevilla. How do they bounce back? Have they got enough time left in the transfer window to bring in players that the manager wants? And have they got enough time left to convince some players that do want to leave to stick around? Now let's move to the Spanish capital and talk about a club that look like they're bedding down for a quiet one, Real Madrid. They won 1-0 away to Rafa Benitez's Celta Vigo this weekend. Again, thanks, it's looking like it's the story of every weekend this, thanks to a Jude Bellingham goal, his 4th of the season, which means that he's actually the top scorer in the Spanish top flight at the moment. So maybe you don't need a number 9, you need a number 5, which is just as well for Los Blancos, because they have picked up an injury to Vinicius Jr. And Vinny Jr. is somebody who the last 2 years in particular has shown how important he can be to the Madrid team. His injury, we don't know if that's going to force the hand. It's unlikely that it will mean that Madrid make another move in the transfer window, because ahead of this weekend's match, Carlo Ancelotti told the press that he considers his squad to be closed. We know that the transfer window always throws up some surprises, so it will be interesting to see how all 20 clubs line up next weekend for the 4th round of games in La Liga. Anyway, that's all we've got time for this week. Adios.